Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about questions in an interview. So let's get into it. So the question in question was posted on a video that I made where someone asked me, what is the most memorable answer a programming candidate has given you? And short version is that I had a coworker a while back who he basically had a few. He didn't really ask any specifically impressive questions, if that makes sense. He just had he had a mind map. Let's just call it that. A big mind map, and he kind of just blew us away with the fact that he had done all this prep work. So there was a comment posted on that video where someone asked, was there any of the questions that this candidate asked that were unique or important? If so, what were they? Now, the reason why I wanted to address this a little bit is because, well, basically what I wrote back was that no, it's the same old question. He asked the same questions that most people do. And I think that it is important for us to talk a little bit about this thing that, well, I want to address it more because I can imagine it being something that a lot of software developers who are going through the interviewing process, especially the newer ones, it might be that you have this thing kind of wrong, or like this, you might have an idea that I want to kind of squash as quickly as possible, because there is quite a few videos and there's a lot of content like questions to ask in an interview, how to answer them, etc., etc. And for the most part, what I can see is that the people who are making these videos know fuck all about software development, and it's kind of sad that people give away. Well, I can't really say it in a nice way. They seem to produce completely irrelevant bullshit for software developers or people who are trying to get into software development, based on, well, from what I can see, content that has never ever been tried in the real world, or if it has, it's been tried by people who are not software developers. So what I wrote back was basically that it is actually really rare that a candidate has like questions that are not completely standard. If you have been part of a software, like a recruitment process, either as like a manager or if you're a software developer, because it's really common that software developers or from the company join in and sit in and like help with the technical interviews or just talk to the candidate if they make it through the process. It's nice to meet the team before you actually get that offer, because the team usually, well, in the more progressive companies at the very least, have a say in whether or not this candidate gets hired, which is a very good thing. Any decent manager will do this. So what I argue is that if you've ever thought, maybe I should figure out what questions to ask from the company, I want you to understand that it's really important that you don't try to figure out how to impress people with your questions, or how do I put this? If you don't know what matters to software developers and to IT companies, it's very unlikely that you will be able to impress anybody, especially if you're a junior software developer. There are things that are very impressive, and we're going to talk about that. I promise you, I'm not just going to tell you not to do things that are trying to impress people without telling you what is actually relevant and what's not relevant. I just want you to get away from this idea that there is a way for you to, that there's some magical questions or there's some magical way that you can promote the idea that you're like really, really good through doing something that I really think that you should be avoiding. And honestly, guys, try to, and this is just, you can trust me on this or you can ignore what I'm saying, that's perfectly fine. Try to ask questions that are relevant. not to impress people, not to try to be this or that and so forth. Because the thing is, guys, the most of the time when I talk to people who are trying to impress me with like how much they know and so forth, the only thing that happens is that they come off as, well, the passion is a good thing. Like, there's absolutely passion, but the thing is, you can kind of communicate passion in many ways. It's actually a very bad thing for a junior software developer to try to impress the senior software developers or the senior staff in the interviewing process or in the like first few weeks or few months, because you just come off as annoying. It's there's even people, and I've done this 100 times before, even with this person that what we were talking about in the video who had the mind map. The first thing we said after he left and we had the discussion about, okay, do we want to hire him, yes or no, the first thing was that, yeah, he had a lot of nice positive energy, and the second thing, literally the second thing, was, we're concerned that he's going to be a very strongly opinionated and bothersome person to work with. Because the thing is, if you try to impress us with all your knowledge about functional programming and property-based testing and microservices and stuff that we know for a fact that you don't know the first fucking thing about, because we are senior staff. And even if we're not senior staff, like, we can, like, if you don't know what you're talking about, or if it's very clear that you're like just trying to say as many buzzwords as possible, it will come off as it's the same thing as, you know, how if you're too needy as a friend, or too interested in someone, and you're trying to get on a date or something like that, you're too clingy. It's the same sort of sensation that you're giving people. So. And that is literally it is a risk. It's a very real concern for people who are hiring software developers, that they're going to pull in this person who's not going to be very good, or possibly just have a lot of, like, the energy is there, that's great, but it's also a danger, because it's very bothersome to deal with people who have a lot of wild ideas without any skill to back it up. It's actually the exact thing that happened with the person that we hired him, and after about 6 months, the thing that I was suspecting was going to happen happened. He became, well, he's a good software developer and he contributed a lot, but there was always like this clash. Like, we could never just get him to go, yes, I understand that this is the pragmatic choice. Can we just move on? No. Everything was like a 4-hour lecture on best practices by someone who knows a fraction of what is needed to even have that discussion towards people who are at my skill level, or like have twice the years that I do. And as I said, like that, it's just irritating for a lot of people. So if you want to be impressive in an interview, first and foremost understand that it's not about the buzzwords. It is about the relevancy of what you're talking about and you're asking about. So if let's say, for the sake of argument, that you want some good questions to ask, well, the best question you can possibly ask in any interviewing process, and this is for Google, it is for your startup, it is for every single company out there, it is the silver bullet question. Could you walk me through a little bit, how do you work? Like, what does the stack look like, and how do you usually take a story from, say, being prepared by your stakeholders, and then from the laptop of the person out into production? Just walk me through the flow. That single question will give you a perfect, if you know how to latch on follow-up questions, such as, well, so the testing, are you doing code reviews, are you doing any pair programming, etc., etc. If you ask that question, it acts as the backbone in a discussion, the best discussion that you can have, that will give you the clearest picture, and it is the most relevant question that you could possibly ask, apart from the other stuff, like, of course, salaries and so forth and so forth. You kind of have to play these things by ear a little bit, because different people are different, but that one question, it is the best question. You should ask that in every single interview that you ever go to, if you're dealing with a product company. If it's a consultancy, it's it's a little bit of a different thing, but this is the golden question. And you don't have to ask all that much more than that, because just from that one question, as they talk, try to chime in and ask follow-up questions regarding what they're telling you. And I promise you, you will come off as the rest is just energy. It's the rest of the whole being impressive thing comes down to how experienced are you, how many side projects do you have, or like prior things that you've been doing, extracurricular stuff, and like interests and personality and so forth. All of those other things, they are very important at the whole being impressive in the interviewing thing. But when it comes to just asking the right questions, start with that one question and practice asking that question in every interview, and I can promise you that it will be the best thing that you could possibly ask anybody at any company. So what I want you to take away from this is that try to understand, guys, that having the idea that there are like magical questions or ways for you to communicate that you're very impressive or so forth, it doesn't work that way. It's actually very dangerous for you to try to use too many buzzwords or try to be overly zealous or things like that in an interview. You need to have a good level of energy and positivity with you, because that's something that sells really well. But don't buy into this bullshit that you see on YouTube and this thing that you see on the blog, like these 5 magical questions that you should ask in every interview, etc., etc. There are absolutely things that are relevant to ask about, but I don't want you to get into the headspace that you should use the few questions you actually have to the company, because remember, they test you usually a lot more than you get to test them. So those questions, they matter, and what you should be focusing on is to get the information that is relevant for you out from them. It's not about being impressive at that stage, it is about asking relevant questions that gives you a picture of how that company works. And as a side note, that looks a lot more professional than if you ask them if they use property-based testing or how, I don't know, how many mob coding sessions they have or so forth. Like, you can ask these sorts of questions, guys, but try to just make it relevant and not just a competition in how many buzzword questions you know. Have a great day.